Welcome to the Escape into Board Games podcast.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
And this is our escape from the real world where we talk about board games. In this episode, we talk about games with a nature theme.
So please join us for the Escape into Board Games podcast.
Board games are changing. In past episodes, we've talked about how the definition of a board game has widened to include all kinds of tabletop games, card games, dexterity games, etc.
But the people playing board games has changed as well. Board gamers have become more diverse and inclusive. And with that has come a change in what games are about, the experiences they provide, and how they make us feel when played.
In recent years, we've seen more and more games with exciting themes. Games about the natural world, birds, insects, plants, and wildlife. And these games are appealing to more and more people inside and outside of the hobby.
In this episode, we talk about the nature of games. So Chris, we talked about Wingspan in our Great Games for Giving episode. Wingspan came out in 2019.
Yep.
And at the time of this recording has sold 1.4 million copies.
Yeah. Which is incredible. I mean, what is that? That's, just a few years that game has reached that number.
So by comparison, Ticket to Ride, which has been out for almost 20 years, has sold 8 million copies.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously Ticket to Ride sold a lot more, but in just a few short years, Wingspan has hit over an eighth of what Ticket to Ride has done in 20. That's incredible.
It really is, yeah. And I think it's a good example of what we're seeing happening in the hobby, and that more board games are becoming more inclusive for more people.
Yeah, like games were all sort of economic games, farming games, war games.
Lots and lots of conflict games.
Like even going back to like chess and checkers, like it's a conflict game, right?
Yeah.
Monopoly obviously was an economic themed game.
Huge game, yeah.
But I think with the introduction of Wingspan, we've seen this sort of explosion of games that are natural or nature themed or animal themed.
Yeah. And there are literally hundreds of nature themed games out there. And I wouldn't say that Wingspan spurred on this trend, but I think it's a great example of this trend continuing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the first game that's had this enormous amount of success.
It's huge. Yeah. Huge success.
And it's influenced, I think, a lot of publishers and designers to create other games that are similar themed or have more interesting or approachable themes. Wingspan is a game about bird watching and collecting birds, and it's got this sort of real relaxed vibe about it. It's not, these are my soldiers and those are your soldiers and we're going to fight. And that's what this game is about.
Grab your dice.
Yeah. It's like, we're going to look at birds. Oh, look at that one. It's really pretty.
Yeah.
And the artwork is fantastic. And that's a big factor of a lot of the games that are themed around nature, because nature is beautiful. It's full of color.
That's so true, yeah. And we're seeing the trend again in board games to include beautiful artwork. And what more beautiful artwork to include than pictures of flowers and plants and landscapes.
And I think Wingspan's huge success in such a short period of time, we're just going to see more and more and more of this.
Yeah.
I mean, for years, designers and publishers have been trying to find other themes to appeal to a wider audience. But I think when you look at what happened with Wingspan and how popular that was, it really shows you that it's set this new trend.
Gave those publishers the confidence to continue with these kinds of games and publishing risky themes.
Yeah.
I think what we are going to continue seeing is more new games coming out each year that are going to have a more wide variety of different themes.
Yeah.
It's going to get crazier. Like we have seen standing people around a table to take a picture, ghosts communicating with mediums in order to solve a murder, dragons flying in the sky, or firefighters running into a burning building.
Right. When you look at BGG, Board Game Geek, and you look at sort of the top 100 games at any given time, at least right now, there's a lot of similar themes out there, right? There's train games, there's science fiction games like Terraforming Mars and Dune, there's fantasy games like War of the Rings, there's IP games like Star Wars.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of, heavily conflict games. Twilight Struggle and Scythe and there's the odd abstract game like Azul in there and comic book games. There's a whole mix of everything, right?
Yeah.
I feel like when you kind of scroll down the list a little bit, you see Wingspan in there in the top 100. You see games like Everdell. Everdell has got this real, nature, animals doing things in the forest. I think they can talk, that kind of thing.
There's an actual tree in that game.
Yeah, there's an actual tree on the board, which is quite cool. So I think the traditional themes are still sticking around, at least in terms of, what people rate as their favorite games. Like they want to play the Star Wars game or the space themed game or Battlestar Galactica, but we're seeing much more of games like Wingspan pop into the top 100 because they're hugely popular, hugely successful, and selling tons and tons of copies, which is great to see.
The first game we're going to present today is a little outside of the top 100, but again, it is beautiful, nature-themed, and very approachable. Parks. Parks is a worker placement, track movement, national parks touring game for 1 to 5 players ages 10 and up that plays between 30 and 60 minutes. Parks was designed by Henry Audubon and was published by Keymaster Games in 2019.
So Parks is a gorgeous game. There's tons of different art for all the different parks in there. They've got different artists creating these cards, these giant size cards with this art on it.
The art comes from the 59 Parks series, which is a commissioned art piece to celebrate the U.S. national parks. And they've got a website where they can sell these posters and postcards and all the rest of it. So this started with the art, and then this game was commissioned to go along with it.
Very cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. From the 59 Parks print series website. The 59 Parks print series is a celebration from our national parks. The strength of the series comes from an eclectic mix of artists and the unique beauty of each park. Every screen printed poster is printed here in the US. Our goal is to get poster nerds into the parks and park nerds into posters. The full series is currently being archived by the Library of Congress.
It's certainly a big part of the appeal to someone who's just looking at the game. It's like, oh, wow, look at the cards, look at this, look at that.
Yeah.
And the art styles some of them are really different. Like there's a wide range of different art styles and artists because so many different, like at the back of the rule book, there's like a list of a whole ton of these different artists. And each one is a different artist that's done the art for that card or that park.
Cool. Mm-hmm. You can get the same art on playing cards and postcards. There's a field notes. There's actually a coloring book that you can get as well with this art. It was kind of interesting.
Really? That's hilarious.
Yeah, it is that good.
Yeah. So hearing that, you'd think maybe the game isn't that great because
that's right.
It was created around a series of posters. Maybe the game is just kind of slammed together. Yeah. That is not the case here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Parks is a fantastic game. It's one that my wife and I have played a lot, both expansions, and have played it extensively. We love this game.
So in Parks, players will take on roles of 2 hikers as they trek through different trails across this track that has different action spaces, and each space is another beautiful picture depicting another beautiful scenic view. While on the trail, these hikers will take actions and collect memories of the places the hikers visited. These memories are represented by cool wooden tokens like suns and mountains and trees. They collect these, which they can then trade in at the end of the year to collect a national park card, which are these beautifully illustrated tarot-sized illustrations from the 59 Park series.
I like the idea that the resources are your memories that you're collecting along the way at the parks, And then you've kind of got this card which is kind of like collecting one of those posters that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Collecting this park poster or a postcard or something like that along the way.
Some of them might require 3 mountains and 2 forests. And then when you cash that in, you can get 4, maybe even 5 victory points, which would be quite a lot. Mm-hmm. Maybe some of them you need 3 waters, and that would give you 2 victory points.
Yeah.
So, of course, the more memories that you're cashing in, the better cards you get.
Yeah, the better experience and the more points.
There's only 3 sort of available to choose from, but you can always draft blind from the top of the deck as well.
The trail. The trail is the board. I mean, there is no board, but it is kind of a board of where your players go.
There's a bunch of these beautiful cards that represent the different locations. You shuffle them up and then lay them out next to each other. So each of the different locations are going to be in a different spot each round of the game.
Mm-hmm. And they're kind of like a triangular chevron shape, which is neat. I just think. And you kind of fit them all together, and it goes, from point A to point B. Each one allows you to take a different kind of action on them.
Yeah, like maybe you're going to get 2 suns.
Yeah, if you land on that tile, you put a hiker on it, you get 2 suns. Or it might be mountain or trees, a forest.
Or it could be an action, like take a special bonus card or take a picture, which would be cash in a few of these memory tokens to get a victory point. So although your main goal is to acquire these beautifully oversized park cards, there are a few other ways that you can get victory points throughout the game. You start the game with a little bonus card, which would be a little goal that you can try to achieve. Maybe you can get a bunch of gear together, and if you do, then maybe you get 3 extra victory points.
Yeah.
Which you think might not be a lot. And you told me when we were starting our most recent game, don't worry about those bonus cards because it's only going to be 2 or maybe 3 victory points, and it'll be too hard to get and not be worth those victory points. But then it turned out to be the deciding factor in our game.
That's how you won, by completing those, and I completed none. Right. So don't listen to me, obviously, when I'm teaching the game.
That's right.
I can teach the game, just don't teach strategy. There we go.
Considering that one of those park cards could be 4 victory points, it does seem a little silly that your bonus, right? You have to get like 10 equipment points or something in order to get an extra 3. It seemed very hard to get those additional points, but it did sort of help out. As the game goes on, you start to realize collecting some resources are going to be easier than collecting others.
Right.
Depending on which bonuses you get and which gear you acquire and which cards come out in which order, it could be really hard to get mountains, for example.
Yeah, there's only one campsite on the trail every season that has mountains.
Yeah.
So they can be difficult. So the mountains, I think, are probably the most scarce in the game.
Okay.
And probably suns or maybe water are the most abundant.
There's forests, waters, sun, and mountains.
There are these wooden cutout tokens that you get. Yeah. So like in the shape of a tree, it's a green wooden tree. In the sun, it's like this little starburst of yellow.
Yeah. It could have easily been a cardboard token, right?
Absolutely.
You could have been punching this out of cardboard, but no, it's like a meeple, each one.
Yeah, it's a little meeple.
But then there's also a wild resource, which is an animal.
The wilds are amazing.
Yeah.
Each one is completely different. There's no 2 wooden wild tokens that are exactly the same.
Wow.
They're all a different animal. So like there's a deer, there's a wolf, there's a bear, there's a beaver.
That's awesome.
There's a couple that it's kind of like, I don't know what that is. Is that a platypus? I'm not sure.
Platypus?
But there's not many like that. And they're these little brown things, and they're wild. They count as any one resource, and they're beautiful.
Yeah.
And every time I play, I line them all up and all the wild ones that I get, and I have to take a picture of them because they're beautiful. They're stunning. If you look at a deer in the wild, you see it kind of in silhouette for the most part behind some trees, and you just kind of see the outline. And that's what these tokens look like. They look like a silhouette of the animal. It's like, look over there in the forest, there's a big deer. Oh my God, there's a bear. Take a picture of the bear. Like that's kind of, that's what we do up here for fun as we go traveling around looking for nature to take pictures of. And that's kind of what these pieces look like in the game, right? Like they look like these little memories that you would take if you went for a real walk in the national forest.
That's so awesome. There's even a beautiful insert that holds all the tokens separate from each other. So you've got like a little bank of stuff. They don't get mixed up.
It's true. The insert's amazing. It's got one of the plastic lids, and it looks like a branch.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
With little different sections for the different ones. But I think it's just hilarious that you love inserts. This game comes with amazing inserts.
I like it when the components are separate, that you can have a little bank that you can reach in to just grab what you need. And they're beveled edges, so it's easy to scoop out a piece.
Yeah.
The rounded bottoms. That's the kind of production that I appreciate. And if you're going to invest some money into buying a board game and space on your shelf, it's nice that it's not an empty box filled with air.
Yeah.
That what's inside is very, very useful and looks very, very beautiful. So, and then on top of that, the game is fantastic.
Yeah. So you're traveling around, you're moving your hiker from one spot to another, and there's lots of opportunity to collect different resources. But what you can spend them on is reliant upon what 3 face-up park cards are available, right?
Yeah.
But you can always reserve one.
Right.
For a future. If you don't have the necessary resources in your hand, you can always reserve one. And that immediately replenishes. So sometimes the strategy is to reserve a lot so that you can see more park cards that come up. Instead of that little 2-point card that I had all the resources for, now I've got one that's worth 5 points and I still have all the resources for that one too, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I still have the 2-point one in my reserve for later in the game when I don't have quite as many resources.
That's clever. Yeah, I never thought of that. So in parks, you have your 2 workers and you're moving them from left to right across this collection of different parks that, again, are randomly ordered for each round. You can only move your guys in one direction, and only one worker can occupy any one space at any given time. The first time you set them all up, you're going to be putting some resources down on top. In addition to the resource that the card provides, the first player that reaches these cards will also get another token, maybe a sun or a water. So when you're progressing down the track, you're incentivized to kind of race to the locations that give you the resources that you really need, because you want to get there first and get those resources. But if you go too far forward, you're going to skip over a bunch of spaces you could have also visited to collect additional resources. Mm-hmm. So there's this push and pull, very similar to a time track, where you want to get there as quickly as possible, but also hit all the spaces between here and there. And there's just not enough time to do both. You're going to race your opponents to those spots. And that's the decision space right there, is how far forward are we going to go with my guy, right? Because you go right to the end and get that really great spot, but then you've skipped over all these spaces.
Yeah.
You have 2 workers to move. So one guy you can keep back and you can move the other one forward. That's a bit of a strategy. But again, you really want to be able to hit every space.
Yeah. Every game is a little bit different because the different locations on the trail come out randomly.
Yeah.
So you may get the ability to visit a park early, but you don't have the resources yet because you haven't visited all the sites that have the suns and the mountains and the water that you need to visit the park.
Yeah.
So you have to get those at the end. And then other times you'll get all the resources early and you can hit up a park in the middle somewhere, visit that park, and then do it again at the end of the trail and visit a park as well. It's really a game of sort of racing and maximizing or being the most efficient with what's available. And you kind of got to watch your opponents to see what they're going after. It's like, oh, look, there's a card there that takes 4 mountains and 3 waters, and I have 1 mountain and 1 water. I got to go get more mountain, more water. But Matt's there already, and he has 4 mountains and 4 water. Yeah. So he's obviously going to take that high-valued card before I get there. So maybe I should try for something else.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it can be a little bit mean if you're not paying attention in those cards that you've saved up all your resources and maybe gone to the special tile to convert one resource into another resource. And then you're almost at the end and your opponent snipes it out from under you.
It certainly can feel mean, that's for sure. It's like, oh, you got there before me. I've been saving up the whole time. I used all my turns to get that, and you took it before me, especially in a 4-player game. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
And invariably, when it comes around to me, now I have all these resources, and a new card is out, and it's not necessarily the one I want or that I have resources for. It always seems to work out in the end.
Yeah.
Maybe not as perfectly as I had hoped or had planned, but it always seems to work out that I can use those resources to get a campsite that is relatively decent and still have them ready for the next turn, or get one that's even worth more points or something that works even more perfectly. There is also along the trail lots of different opportunities to trade in 2 suns for a mountain and a water, or you can trade in one of anything for a wild or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's lots of opportunities to play with the resources that you have and that you get along the way. What I like about the trail, you have 2 different hikers, and no 2 hikers can be on the same spot. So you have to kind of leapfrog over each other. Because you have 2 of them, like you said, you can make one go ahead and the other one stay back for when that really valuable resource becomes available, and then you jump on it and take it. But it gives you this real flexibility. I think a lot of older games would give you 1 hiker and no opportunities to play with your resources and exchange different things. What I love, though, is this gives you 2 hikers. That gives you tons more options of what you can do on your turn. In the trail, you can exchange resources, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the way the trail works is the first person to get to the end of the trail has an option of sort of 3 different actions that they can take. They can reserve a park, and they would get the first player token for the future rounds. They can purchase gear like a backpack that would, helps them throughout the game, or they can actually visit a park and turn in their resources and get it.
Yeah.
But what happens is, as everyone moves to the end, the last hiker on the board cannot just go from trail site to trail site to trail site, collecting tons of resources, taking their time while everybody waits for them to finish, 7 turns because no one else is done. If everyone's on the last spot but one, that last player has to go to the last spot. So you can't just have one guy camping out in the back of the pack waiting to just load up on resources. You have to sort of balance the 2 different things.
You have to stay with the pack.
Yeah.
Because you can see that ending coming. And if you haven't moved your guy forward enough, he's going to be missing out on some resource collection.
There's lots of different ways to get points in this game and to move it around for what is a really kind of restrictive rule about you have to follow this trail and you can only go forward and 2 pieces can't be on the same.
It feels like it's more of a tactical game than a strategic game because you go in with these plans.
Yeah.
And then you're presented with the board when it's on your turn and you're like, well, I can only move one of these guys forward. To a spot. And then you're like, well, I'm just going to make the best of this current situation. The best I can do right now is get that mountain token because he's right there. I'm not going to move him too far forward. And so each of my turns, the decision space is pretty simple. And then like you were saying, you want to get that really expensive Yosemite card. That looks gorgeous. Look at that. The art on it's fantastic. It's really expensive. Going to give me 4 victory points. But I need all these mountains. How do I get mountain? I can't. I got to convert. I got to hit this spot. I got to hit that spot. That's your strategy.
Yeah.
But then your turn comes and you're like, well, I can't get the mountain. Well, but I can get those 3 waters.
Yeah.
Right. And so each decision on your turn is relatively light, but at the same time, it's got this sort of flow and depth to it.
And while it can feel mean, it's not terribly confrontational. Like, okay, Matt took that card I've been saving for and it was worth 5 points. But now instead of getting the 5-point card, I can get 2 3-point cards.
Yeah.
And it balances out that way. Maybe I get more points or 1 more point or 2 more points. And that's the other thing is all the games that I've played are really close in score.
Yeah. I thought I was trouncing you in our most recent game. I was doing so well. Everything was all falling into place. I had just enough resources to get the most expensive card every time I was buying stuff, and I was filling out my bonus and everything. Yep. But second last turn, we were neck and neck. We're like exactly tied. It was crazy.
It's great for playing with newbies because it's a relaxed feeling. Like I don't really get the sense that I'm going on a hike, but it's not this high pressure, stressful. It's very thinky because there's a lot of options of what you can do. But it's not stressful thinking.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's a light puzzle that is very attainable. Mm. And like you said, great for new players. And it's gorgeous.
Parks is a great game. Parks has 2 expansions.
Nice.
And we own them both, and I can't speak highly enough about both of them. They're both excellent expansions. Now when we play them, we almost always play with both expansions mixed in, even if we're playing with someone new. It's a little bit more complex.
Yeah.
A little bit longer of a game with them, but very, very good. Excellent game. Herbaceous. Herbaceous is a push-your-luck herb-collecting garden card game for 1 to 4 players, ages 8 and up, that plays in about 20 minutes. Herbaceous was designed by Eduardo Baraf and Steve Finn with art from Beth Sobel and was published by Pencil First Games in 2017. So in Herbaceous, we're planting and potting different herbs. There's a community garden that is in the center of the table, and then each player has their own sort of private garden. And we're collecting these different herbs and putting them into 4 different pots that hold different kinds of herbs. So what you're doing is you're kind of racing against your opponents to fill your pots with herbs, following the goals and the guidelines of the different pots that you have. Each pot can hold herbs in a different way.
How many different kinds of herbs are there in this game?
There are 7 different herbs, and I think there's 9 of each card, but you take out some depending on how many players that you play.
Gotcha.
So no one knows exactly how many of each one is in there. And we're all competing to fill those pots from your private garden and or the community garden.
Cool.
So what you do, it's kind of give one, take one.
Okay.
We've talked about this on other episodes. It's the kind of thing that I really love is you are taking something valuable in this game. In this case, it's a herb card. It's a kind of herb.
Yeah.
And you put it into your private garden. And then you draw another card and it has to go in the other location, the community garden. But here's the catch. Your first card can go in the community garden or into your private garden.
Yeah.
But the other card has to go in the other location. So if I put the first card in the community garden, that means I have to take whatever the second card is.
And you don't know what the second card is when you're making that decision?
Nope. You have no idea. It's just flipping cards.
Oh, wow.
On your turn, you draw a card, make a decision. It either goes in the middle of the table for everybody or it goes into your spot where no one else can touch it. And then the other card goes in the opposite location. Your turn's done. That's basically what you're doing throughout the entire game. And you're going to be collecting these herbs. And there's no bad cards. Like you can't get a card that says, this herb rottens all the herbs in your private garden or anything like that.
No, it's just 7 different kinds of cards.
Yeah.
Bay, sage, lavender, tarragon, rosemary, dill, and saffron.
Yeah.
Each beautifully illustrated by the very talented Beth Sobel.
Yeah, and the art is amazing. And again, this is a big draw of this game. What it becomes, though, is that first card, does it make a set in your private garden? Does it let you, expand what you're trying to fill those pots with? Because there's a catch to the different pots. The pots can only be filled once. You have 4 pots and 4 pots only. So it's a very short game. And each pot can only be filled in a certain way. So if you're trying to fill the pot that has one of each different herb, you want to have at least 7, I think is how many that pot holds. So you want to have 1 card of 7 different herbs before you pot there. That can take quite a few turns to collect those 7.
Yeah.
But the catch is you can take 3 from your private garden and 3 or 4 from the community garden, as long as they're all different.
Yeah.
And then you plant them in that pot that takes all different ones. And that pot's closed to you for the rest of the game.
Okay.
So if you do that really early in the game and you only did it with 5 different herbs, if later on in the game you collect the 6th and 7th one, you can't add to that pot.
Oh.
It's done. It's closed. They're growing now. You can't add to them.
Gotcha.
So you have to use those 2 other cards for something else. One of the pots takes all the same kind. So you want to collect as many of those as you can. Mm-hmm. And there's a limit. It might be 6 or 7 different cards that you can put in there.
Yeah.
But they all have to be the same for that pot. Another pot takes pairs. So you have to have all your herbs be in pairs. So 2 rosemary, 2 thyme, 2 tarragon, 2 sage.
Right.
That's 4 pairs.
Are these 4 cards the same 4 cards each game?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, everyone has the same 4 pots that have the same 4 requirements, and it's the same every game.
Cool.
And it's really about timing. It's kind of a race because you are trying to get your pairs and your all of one kind and all the different kind as fast as you can so that you can pot them in your things and not have your opponents take the cards you need from the community pile, the community garden.
Right.
But it's also, you don't want to do it too soon because unless you've maxed out each pot, you're not going to max out your points.
Right.
Because on the pot that takes pairs,
for 2 cards, you get 4 points. For 6 cards, you get 12 points. For 12 cards, you get 18 points.
So you want to have as many pairs when you go to pot as you can. You can plant in one of your pots at the beginning of your turn. So before you draw 2 new cards. So you kind of have to plan ahead.
Yeah.
And you have to decide, okay, now is the time. I've got enough cards to do my pairs. I'm going to do that one. And then I'll draw my 2 cards and focus on the other 3 pots for the rest of the game kind of thing.
Right.
And your opponents are doing the same thing. And you can see your opponent has 5 pairs and you've only got 4 pairs. So you have to kind of keep up to them before you pot it because you're going to lose. You're going to have less points that way. Unless you can make those points up with the other pots that you do.
What triggers the end of the game?
At the end of the game is if the deck runs out, you just continue drawing from the community pool and you play until all players have filled all 4 pots. So if I potted all 4 pots early in the game, say like halfway through the game, I'm over. My turn's done. I'm not going to get any more points and my turn's done.
And we can continue to play without you.
Yeah, and you continue to get points and pairs and singles and pot your plants and you'll get more points than me because I potted too early.
Wow.
It's a very short game. It's a very, very light game. It's perfect for, a gateway game to kind of explain to people, this is what games do now. And, you can play 2 or 3 of them easily in a night with 3 or 4 players. It's, 20 minutes or so.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, and it is such a pretty game. And it's kind of chill, again, like we were talking about with the other games in this episode so far. It's got this nice, relaxed...
Yeah.
The decision space is small, not very stressful, and the art and components make it very compelling.
And because at certain player counts, you take out a certain number of cards, you don't really know what's left if you're card counting. And there's always the possibility while you're playing it, right? You're going to draw a card that's going to go into your private garden. There's always a possibility that's the card that you've been waiting for. So that adds to a bit of the fun is even if, I'm not doing so well on the pears pot, but I'm doing really well on the 7 different herbs pot.
Yeah.
So you got this sort of balance of what you're working on. It's the kind of game that you want to play at least 3 players with, I think. It's okay at 2. It's almost a little meaner at 2 because you can watch your opponent much closer than you do at 3 and 4 player counts.
Right.
You always have to give 1 card to your opponents and 1 to yourself. And you never know what that's going to be.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I love that.
Such a simple little give and take. I take something, now I have to give you something. But that creates this drama in the decision of what you're giving to your opponents. Herbaceous. Very light, very easy to learn, but also beautiful and fun and, create some interesting decisions and some tension in what you're doing throughout the game.
Yeah, it's lovely. Now, if you noticed a trend with the games that we've been talking about so far, they all have a single player or solo mode. I don't usually do a solo mode of a game if it's different than the 2, 3, 4 player version.
Right.
If there's going to be some sort of modified rule set, I tend to shy away from that. But it's nice to know that it's there. I certainly have played my fair share of solo games, and they are enjoyable. Yeah, there's game there for sure.
For me, I tend to play solo when I have to learn the game.
Yeah, that's a great way to...
When I'm just getting out of the box, it's like Sherry doesn't want to play it when I don't know it yet.
Yeah.
I don't know it well enough to teach, so you just play it. And I'll play it solo. And so, if there is no solo version, I'll play 2 players of the same game.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get a sense of what you can do on your turn and what the rules are. And then I'll call Sherry in. But generally speaking, when I pull out a game, if I'm going to play it solo, invariably I'll get it all set up and Sherry will come in and go, I'll play with you. Like, okay.
Not solo anymore. We're going to get back to the show after a brief message. This next ad is for Chris's own company, Geeky Goodies. If you'd like to hear what an ad for your product, game, or website might sound like, Escape Into Board Games is looking for sponsors. Drop us a line at escapeintoboardgames@gmail.com. When we escape into board games, we're always wearing our Geeky Goodies t-shirts.
They are great conversation starters for gamers and non-gamers.
But did you know that they also sell drink coasters, socks, mouse pads, cupcake toppers, and so much more?
All things board games.
All things geeky.
Visit geekygoodies.com and use coupon code ESCAPE for a 10% discount off your purchase.
Indian Summer. Second Summer is a polyomino tile placement, grid coverage, walk in the forest, abstract strategy game for 1 to 4 players, ages 10 and up, that plays in about an hour. Second Summer was designed by Uwe Rosenberg and was published by Spielweise in 2017. You won't be able to find this game online or in stores under the name of Second Summer. We've changed the name of this game for this episode. Here's why.
San Francisco State University American Indigenous Studies professor Andrew Yolovet said that while the term Indian Summer might seem innocuous, it's part of a larger body of normalized euphemisms that keep First Nations people tied to nature and an imagined past in the minds of most North Americans.
Indigenous peoples is the collective name for the original people of North America and their descendants. Often, Aboriginal peoples is used. The Canadian Constitution recognizes 3 groups of Indigenous peoples: First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Fall in New England. Before winter makes its appearance, a particularly warm fall bathes the forest in a golden shimmer. During this second summer, New England blossoms one final time. Treetops are ablaze with countless colors, a living rainbow with color ranging from green to orange to red. The first leaves have begun to fall, and our steps, along with the diligent squirrels, rustle the colorful foliage. On our walks through the woods, we discover all kinds of little treasures. We collect berries, nuts, mushrooms, and feathers. We pause for a moment to watch the shy inhabitants of the forest before we set off home, where a good game and hot tea await us. So in Second Summer, players are taking a walk through the forest in the fall and collecting polyomino tiles of different colors, red, orange, and green. Each of the tiles have a number of squares to them. The polyomino tiles are like Tetris pieces. Mm-hmm. The polyomino tiles are called leaf tiles because they're all covered in these colorful leaves.
Yeah.
Beautifully, yeah, just look so pretty.
The tiles themselves, each one individually, looks so amazing. They are like you said in the description, they're either sort of bright oranges and reds and yellow, and there's some greens in there. And when you put them all out on the table and on your board, it's really a beautiful looking game.
So you're drafting these polyomino tiles from the center of the table and placing them onto your own personal tableau, which is a dirt forest floor. And on that dirt forest floor, randomly placed, are bonus tiles.
Yeah.
So all the polyomino tiles that you're drafting will have a hole in them, like a little poked hole. And the idea is that you're supposed to line that hole up to the treasure in your board in order to collect it. You get that bonus. So if you frame the blueberry, then you get to take a blueberry from the supply. If you frame a little acorn, you get to take an acorn from the supply.
Yeah.
Once you've collected these berries and nuts and mushrooms and feathers, you can then cash them in for special abilities. You could take a leaf tile from another player, or maybe take 2 turns in a row. So when you're playing these polyomino tile placing games, you often get these little squares that you can't fill, these little holes throughout your patchwork. And a good way to fill them is to draft squirrels. You can spend these little nuts in order to get little square squirrel tiles, and then each square has a different illustration of the squirrel on it. And you get to put, sort of patch up your quilt, right?
Yeah.
Because it's very similar to patchwork in this way. And you get to just fill in those little holes with these squirrel tokens.
At the end of the game, when your board is completely full or pretty much full, it's really beautiful. Like, you've got all these different colored leaves that are scattered all across the ground.
Yeah.
And it's all, like we said, oranges and yellows and greens and, bright reds. And you filled all of the brown spots, which was the ground underneath, with this fallen leaves. It's really, really a beautiful little game.
Yeah. So it's a race to complete your entire grid and cover up every single square. And you're going to have to use those squirrels in order to get those individual squares you weren't able to fill in with the tiles. But because it's a race to the finish, everybody gets very, very close to completing their whole tile.
Yeah.
Unlike Patchwork, where you can finish a game and half of it isn't even finished, right? There's a big, huge holes in it.
Yeah.
But in this game, everybody has enough time to get very, very close to finishing everything, which is a nice, satisfying feeling, right? It's always within a few turns that, I just had one more. I could have done that, right? Everybody's very, very tight. But it's got that walk in the park feel. It really feels like you're walking in the park, because on your turn, you're going to get a choice of drafting a certain number of tiles. And that's an easy decision to make. It's either this one or this one or this one. And so you just grab one, and then, how am I going to put it on I can put it here, I could put it there.
Rotate it around.
You're right, you're making a little collage now.
Yeah, there's kind of like this arts and craft feel to it. It's like, okay, if I put it there, that's going to show this icon underneath, which will give me this ability. But if I put it there, I think that space that's left will be easier to fill with that piece that I see is coming up, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You feel like you've accomplished something when you fill your board. I remember feeling that.
Yeah.
Like, I did this. This is great. This is a good game. It's a very good game.
Yeah. So again, it's nice and light, easy decisions to make on your turn. Very, very pretty to look at. And it has a solo version as well.
Oh, it does too, yes.
Yeah.
That also is a product of the changing nature of board games today.
Yeah.
They are no longer, we've got to get the whole family around the table for 3 hours to play this game on Monopoly. Or I've got to find someone who likes Risk to play it.
Yeah.
Or that kind of game to play it.
Or like you said, I want to learn how to play this game before I bring and invite my friends and family to play it with me.
Yeah, and that's a big factor in what's happening in games today.
Yeah.
Is gamers want to play the game by themselves when no one else is around. That does happen. There's a huge community of solo gamers out there online who are even writing their own house rules to make games that don't have a solo component because they're a little bit older to do that. And I think that's a sign of what's happening in gaming today too.
Yeah.
Is that more and more games that get published need to have a solo variant.
Very true. Very true. The nature of games are changing in that we are seeing board games becoming more inclusive, including player count
and theme and appealing to a whole wider range of audiences.
Yeah, and a different feel. It's not only that the games aren't about conflict, they aren't about conquest, they aren't about exploitation, but they also don't feel like those things either.
Yeah.
There's a game that feels like a walk in the park.
Yeah.
This game feels like you're repotting some herbs.
Yeah.
Like just feels different.
You're playing Tetris with leaves.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm doing my memory board, my collage. I'm collaging.
Living Forest. The Living Forest is a push your luck, deck building, race, forest creature game for 1 to 4 players ages 10 and up that plays in about 40 minutes. The Living Forest was designed by Aske Christensen in 2021 and was published by Ludonaut with artwork by Apolline Etienne. Four spirits of nature, winter, spring, summer, and autumn, have been called to rescue the sacred tree of the forest facing the devastating flames of Anabi. All of them want to become a legend by saving their home and, this way, receiving the honorable title of Grand Protector. If they want to win this battle against the terrible Anabi, they will have to act, plant protective trees, fend off the relentless flames, or awaken Sankey and the guardian of the forest. So that's the theme, whatever that means. So the Living Forest is an interesting mix of different mechanics, not a ton of like really new, exciting things that we've not seen before in other games.
Okay.
But has deck building, and it's done in a very similar way to Mystic Vale, with that sort of flip the top card of your deck, push your luck Don't get too many of the bad icons.
Right.
Otherwise your turn ends, kind of thing.
Okay.
And then it lets you buy cards that you can add to your deck for future turns. It allows you to purchase tiles, which you then place into your own little section of the forest board. And there's some rules about how you can place them, but basically you're planting trees in there. And some of those trees will give you bonus actions that you can use throughout the game. And it's also one of the victory conditions. As well, there are fires that happen every round. And as a group, have to put those fires out. And if the group doesn't come together and extinguish all of the fires, then the entire group, everyone at the table, you're going to get these fire cards, this fire animal that's going to go into your deck. And it's basically a negative card that sits there and does nothing for you on your turn. So there are 3 ways to win in this game. And it's basically a race to get one of these 3 things accomplished. There's the fire route, so that's extinguishing 12 different flames of fire. The other way to win is by planting 12 trees into your little part of the forest.
Okay.
Once you planted 12 different trees, then you win the game. And then the third possible way to win is to have these sacred flowers in your deck of cards that you've played. So what happens is on your turn, you're basically card flipping the top card. There's no hand.
Okay.
So you'll flip the top card of your deck, and there'll be some icons on that card, usually icons that you can use and spend on cards and tiles. There may be these sacred flower icons on them that you would use towards winning. And there may be these negative icons that sort of limit what you can do on your turn. And you can only have so many of those negative icons, and then your turn ends, basically.
Gotcha.
The push your luck part is you flip a card and decide, do I want to stop there or do I want to continue? And if you continue, you flip another card, and you flip another card, and you flip another card until at some point you've either accumulated too many of these bad icons, or you just decide, I'm going to stop there. I don't want to draw any more tiles, and I'm going to spend the icons that I have because I have enough to buy exactly what I want to do. On your turn, you can do 2 actions, and those actions come from the icons that are on your cards. So some of them let you put out the fire, like I've already said. Some let you buy a tree. Some let you buy a card. And some will let you actually move around on this track. And the track is really quite neat. Track is how you can get an extra action on your turn sometimes. And then the final set of icons that might appear in all of your cards that are played are these sacred flowers. It looks like kind of like a red lotus. And if you have 12 of those sacred icons showing on all the cards that you played this turn, you will win the game. So it's one of 3 different ways to win. One is by all those cards coming out. One is by slowly extinguishing these fires. And the last one is by planting the trees. So when you play the cards one at a time, this becomes your helpline.
Okay.
These are all the creatures of the forest that have come together to provide some sort of expertise to help you do the things on your turn. So if you have enough water in all of those creatures, you can extinguish 1 or 2 or 3 of the fires that have been started in the forest. If you have enough of the suns, then you can use those icons to purchase the cards that all have different prices on them. And they will have better icons on them. They'll have more things that you can do, more options, that kind of thing. And if you have these little leaf icons, they let you buy one of the tree tiles. You can only buy 1 tree tile on your turn. So that's kind of a slower way to victory. But if you buy one every turn, you're going to win in approximately 12 turns. Now, the catch here is everyone starts with 1 tree in the center of their village. And then you start with these sort of 3 tokens that are at the side of your board. One is a fire icon that's been extinguished. One is a tree that's planted. And one is this sacred flower. So when I said 12, you're already down to needing only 11 of the sacred flowers, 10 of the trees, or 11 of the forests. But here's the catch. If you have this sort of traveling icon in the cards in your helpline, the cards that have come out, if they have this traveling icon, which is kind of like this swirl, you can move along this track, and anytime you come upon an opponent's pawn, you get to leap over them. And if you leap over an opponent on this movement track, which is basically just a circle that everyone's going around and around in the forest, you get to take one of their tokens. So I could take their fire token, and now I have 2 fire tokens, plus any fires that I've already extinguished. So I'm getting closer to winning. Or I might take their sacred flower token. So now I only need to have 10 come up in the cards that I've played, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's this real balance. And on your turn, you can only do 2 things. That's very important. You can only do 2 of these things. And it's this real balance of pushing your luck to get the right amount of icons for the 2 things you want to do. And then do you want to go for the planting trees strategy, which might be a little bit slower? Do you want to go for the sacred flower, which might take a little bit more luck to have all the right cards come out in the right way? Do you want to buy cards early that give you the icons you need? Or do you want to move along on the track and steal all your opponent's fires and things like that? Nice. And that's actually a good way to hinder someone's progress. If you can see someone's got like 9 fire tokens that they're collecting and they only need a few more to win, you can actually use as one of your actions to pass them on the movement board, which lets you steal one of their tokens. So now they only have 8 and they have to get an extra 1. That gives you an extra turn to maybe do the things that you want to do.
Cool.
Every turn, you want to do like 3 things. You want to extinguish fire. You want to get better cards. You want to put a tree down. You want to move on the movement board and steal someone's tokens. But you can't do all of those things. You can only do 2 or maybe just 1. But here's the thing is if you move along on the board as one of your actions, wherever you land is another action that you can take. So it might be to purchase cards.
Okay.
So you have to look at how to maximize the different symbols that you have on your card. So you might use one action to plant a tree, another action to move along the board, and you've got 4 movements. So you can jump 4 squares. If that jumps over another player, you get one of their tokens. And where you end up could be to extinguish a fire, or it could be to buy another card.
Cool.
At the end of the game, if I'm the first one to do one of those first victory conditions, so I got 12 trees planted or I put out 12 fires, everyone else still gets to finish their turn. So everyone does the actions of their turn. And at the end of the game, it's possible that 2 or 3 of us have done 12 things to have finished it. And then there's some tiebreakers and that kind of thing. It's a very tight game. Very rarely do you win, very lopsided.
Yeah.
And it's usually like by a point or 2 that, the second place player. And we have played a few games that have ended in a tiebreaker. What I like about the game is there's a lot of different pieces that you're paying attention to. There's a lot of different things that you want to get on your turn. You want all those things that you possibly can do. And you want to maximize your actions and your goals and that kind of thing. And, like I said, the deck building part seems very heavily influenced by, what you do in Mystic Vale. The tile placement thing, it feels a little bit like the game Ishtar, or even your player board where you're doing tiles with Rajas of the Ganges.
Okay.
Like those kinds of things. Like it's not a terribly innovative set of mechanisms, but it's put together in an interesting way. And there's a lot to keep track of in a lot of different ways. And you want to keep track of what your opponents are going for and how far along they are in the progress.
Yeah, okay.
Components, I would say overproduced is probably a good description.
Yeah.
They're beautiful. I mean, there's these beautiful tree drawings. Every card is a different spirit animal of the forest.
Yeah.
So it might be like a wolf with his eyes glowing, or it might be, an owl in a tree. Yeah. And they all have these little glowing eyes because they're contributing to rescuing the sacred tree that's in the middle of the forest.
Very cool.
Your first player token is this little cardboard plastic tree that's beautiful. For whatever reason, I get kind of like this, I guess it's the theme with some of the art. I almost get this kind of Avatar vibe with it, like the sacred tree and some of the spirit animals of the creatures. They don't look like Avatar, but they have sort of bluish,
James
kind of glowing
Cameron's
color.
Avatar or Avatar The Last Airbender, Chris?
Very good question. I would say Avatar, the James Cameron Avatar.
Because some of these spirit creatures actually look like Avatar The Last Airbender creatures, and so I could see where you would get that comparison.
Oh, yeah, it could be that way too. Okay. Yeah. The tree tiles come in these little cardboard stands. So they actually fit into this little sort of table of where you insert all the tree tiles. And then you put them back in the box exactly in those little tables.
Cool.
They sit in there and they stay in there.
Nice.
And then when you open it up, it's ready to go for the next game.
I love that.
It's very light. The game is easy to teach, although long to teach, because there are so many different parts of things that you have to explain. If somebody's never played a deck building game. So there's a lot to explain, but none of it is super hard to understand. Like, it could easily be played with the 10-year-olds that come in the box recommendation.
Yeah.
It could be explained to people who are very new to modern games. It is relatively short. Like I said, you can play in 40 minutes. I think it's not unreasonable to expect 40 minutes with 4 players.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's fast.
It's a very, very good, very light, but interesting game because you're racing on basically 3 different tracks. It becomes this sort of decision. Oh, I really want that wonderful card that costs 12 suns, but I really got to be focused on putting more fires or putting out trees or both because my opponents are doing those and I'm falling behind. So I really need to get another tree planted or I need to put out another fire. Or sometimes you just want to put out a fire because one person at the table is just going for fire. Every time they come on their turn, they're putting out fire and they're getting closer and closer and closer to this victory. And it feels like you're so much farther away. So you've got to just stop them with one of your actions. And that push your luck becomes really, really important because your starting deck, I think, has 3 or 4 of these negative icons. I think they're called solitary icons. And it just basically stops you from pushing your luck further. There are cards you can buy that cost more that will negate one of those negative icons, just like Mystic Veil. Like you can add cards to your deck.
Yeah.
The Living Force is a game that I feel like has tons of room for expansions. Not just because it's a deck building game. I feel like there's a lot more that they can do with this game. And I was happy to see that, the game's doing very well. It just won the Kenner Spiel des Jahres, the Board Game of the Year award. So, it's getting a lot of attention. People are playing it. For the most part, people are liking it. I think most people's biggest complaint is that it's very light for the Kenner Spiel des Jahres award and should have just won the Spiel des Jahres. But
okay.
I feel like the expansions that are almost certainly going to come from this game is going to add a lot to the complexity and to, how interesting it can go. There is already an expansion that's been released in 2023 called the Kodama expansion. I think we're going to see some more as time goes on. Publishing companies love deck building games because there's always a new set of cards that they can sell us. And as somebody who has and dearly loves deck building, we'll buy them all. So hopefully we'll see more of that.
That's awesome.
That's Living Forest.
Have you played any of the games that we've talked about today? What's your favorite game with a nature theme? Drop us a line at escapeintoboardgames@gmail.com. Thanks for listening to the Escape into Board Games podcast. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Escape into Board Games. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. It helps more people discover Escape into Board Games. You can get an Escape into Board Games t-shirt at geekygoodies.com/escape. Or you can help us fuel the show by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/escape-into-BGS.
This episode is produced by Matt McKenzie and Chris Cormier. Sound editing by Matt McKenzie. Production assistance by Sherry Cormier. Music by John Yasut, Daniel Carlton, and Roman Senyek. See you at the next Escape.